Here. The broadcast is live. It says live. I am ready for this. This is like when a band shows up and they're purposefully late to make the crowd wait and want and cheer for you. Let me just give you the background of this. So, a couple of weeks ago when Cap was out, he was out on paternity leave for a couple of weeks. I had some conversations with my bosses, and they're like, what you're doing on Twitch is great. And the community is awesome and the comments are great and we're getting a lot of good reaction. And out of all of our shows, your listeners are the most into it on Twitch and we love that. We want to do more with that. I said, okay, that sounds great. They said, would you want to do a Twitch only show? And I was like, that sounds great. If you think that'll work. They said, yes, let's do it, but we'll wait until Cap is back. I said, okay, no problem. So we try to put the ball in motion. And then Tuesday ended up being a home studio show. That's where you saw Rosie the cat walk by. So we couldn't do it that day because we had to have Cap on site for this. And then yesterday, all hell broke loose because at midnight, Mraz texted us all and said, hey, I'm not coming in today because all the girls got sick and now I'm sick and we're all vomiting all night long. So we were kind of scrambling yesterday anyway to put a lot of stuff together because we were down a man. And so we were like, let's punt until tomorrow. So then tomorrow is today. And Connor set up a Sunday morning football interview for me to tape with Jeff Hostetler, who won the Super Bowl in 1990 with the Giants at 10:15. So then suddenly we had to punt until 10:30, 10:35 after the interview was done. Then we got to the studios, the podcast studios here at CBS and Odyssey, and they had been disassembled for some other project. So Cap has been like working around the clock to get this going. So we finally are in. We are doing this to make you all want it even more. But the reason that we're doing this is basically that the Twitch audience has become known in the company as a bunch of rambunctious heathens that will say anything and snark about anything and have their own community, their own language, their own everything. So I guess congratulations, because the company was like, hey, these people are really wild. And hey, they really love the show. And hey, we should do more for them. So I said, I like that idea. So anyway, today is maiden voyage. I don't know how it's going to go, how long we're going to do this. We're going to just try to do this as long as it works, as long as you want it to work, and as long as you want it, we'll do it. So I'm going to open this up for Q&A. Q and A with DA, whatever you want to title this, we'll do it. Let her rip. I don't know if I can answer everything, but I will try to answer as well as I can. Okay. So Brain Cramp says, heathen, I take umbrage to that, whatever that means. That's right. If you don't know what heathen means, you probably graduated from West Babylon. I love today that we had our longtime listener, and he's amazing at production, Steven, send us the Super Pig Open. I mean, that was amazing. And when he writes in the script, graduated from West Babylon, and he loves to Babylon, Bilotti just loved it. Justin asks, what's my favorite all-time drop? I am partial to, come on, Damien, wake up. Because that was Painkiller Pat, perhaps the greatest phone call in DA show history. And I love the fact that he's so animated. He knows my name enough, but not completely. That it's not Damien, it's Damon. And everybody calls me DA, especially on the show. So for him to be that riled up and call me Damien, and he was like so upset. Come on, Damien. That's forever a soft spot in my heart, and I always keep it closely on the instant replay box where I have my drops. OMG Mike asks, how old is Rosie the cat? Rosie turns 3 in January. Yeah. So 2 years and 10 months. I was never a cat guy. I had cats growing up, and they always lived in the basement, and they were antisocial, and they didn't like to be cuddled, and it was just like, we have cats, but do they do anything? I guess they caught mice in the basement. But my wife is the biggest animal person ever. She loves dogs, cats. She always had dogs and cats growing up. I mean, she loves all animals. She wants to feed the deer that are outside in our yard. I mean, everything. So she's like, we really got to get a cat. And I was like, okay. And then we got Rosie the cat. And the first month or so, when she was really tiny, we kept her in the guest room. She would sleep there because we wanted to give her own space and kind of understand the surroundings. She was a rescue, as I guess most cats are, right? I mean, you don't really breed cats for cats. Maybe some do. I don't know. We got her from the animal shelter. And so I think they found her under a porch or something. So we were like, just to acclimate her to humans, like here's her own room. We had bought a house, and so we had some space. We were out of the apartment in Brooklyn. And then we let her sleep, anywhere she wanted in the house. She was out of that guest room. And so my wife was like, can she sleep on the bed? And I was like, ugh, all the hair. I don't know. I want to sleep in cat hair. And a few months after that, I kind of relented. And so, I mean, probably by 6 months, 4 months or something, she was sleeping on our bed for the most part. I mean, she'll sleep all over the house. And today, 2.5 years later, I'm bummed when Rosie does not want to sleep with us because, like, I totally fell in love with her. So she changed my life forever. She changed me. As you know, if you've listened to the show, I used to kill all the guys on here with pets. Why are you posting pictures of your pets on social media? Nobody cares. They're only pets. They're animal. Give me a break. And there's still some lines I draw, like when my wife wants to put Rosie the cat in like a sweater. I'm like, I don't think she wants to wear a Halloween costume. But it changed my life because now I'm a total cat person, total pet person. So go figure. Reed Phillips Radio chats in. Mike Sweeney once called me a heathen. I was something like 12 years old. Mike Sweeney, I'm assuming that's the Royals former slugger who very religious. So I don't know, Reed, what you did at 12 to have Mike Sweeney call you a heathen. Perhaps you drank chocolate milk instead of regular. Perhaps you were going 65 instead of 60, although you were only 12, so that wouldn't work. And you shoved a whole handful of Reese's Pieces in your mouth at once, but you're not the only one. I like this comment. Foxy Dong 69. Classy. OMG, it's happening. Which I think is a pretty good reputation of the show. We say we'll do things. We try to do things. Earnestly, we try, but they don't always happen. They don't always come together. And some of that is because of technical restrictions. Some of that is because of corporate support. And some of that might be just from our forgetfulness. Like this thing with Jeff Hostetler today. You'd never know this. I don't know if I would talk about this on the air either. Like this, I feel like Q&DA might be the stuff that I wouldn't talk about on the air because I would find it maybe to grind the show to a halt. Who knows? Anyway, we do this Jeff Hostetler and we have it set up. And today, for some reason, the Dallas morning show, not the sports morning show, like a Dallas FM music show is doing their show from our studios for some reason. Who knows? Not our studios, but our production studios. So we can't tape in there. But Jeff is going to, or his person or whoever, PR person, is going to call us. So we can't call him from a different studio. So Pete the Body and Billy Jock alone are trying to handle this juggling. Do we go in and disrupt the Dallas morning show? We need to make sure when Jeff Hostetler calls in, somebody's there. Can we shift him over to this studio line, get his phone number? Connor Green booked him. Connor's not in today. He's at home. So they're texting and calling back and forth. Billy wants to jump out the 10th floor window. Pete the Body is like trying to, steer the ship. And it's just like really tense. And I just had to be like, guys, it's only Jeff Hostetler. Do not, if this doesn't work, Jeff, I'm sure, but they care so much, and they want to make sure they do it right. And we want to make sure we get the interview, and guests can be flighty, and it's already Thursday. So make sure we're ready for Sunday morning football. But I'm just thinking, like, if only the guests knew how much stress we're on this side of things to get something done, like it's Jeff Hostetler. If we don't get Jeff Hostetler, we'll survive. But so anyway, long story longer, we have great intentions, but could the Dallas Morning Show for like Mix 106.7 Latina like show up and do a show and we just don't have the production studio and suddenly everything goes awry? Yes, that could happen. That could definitely happen. I'm going to scroll through more comments. Man, there's a lot of them, and a lot from Foxy Dong 69. I also wonder, we have a lot of bathroom humor on the show, I feel like, and blue humor and like adult humor. And sometimes I worry about families in cars listening with their kids on the way to school, what have you. And I'm like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have said that. So when we get handles like Foxy Dong 69, I'm like, should I read this? But I always gauge if I think something's funny by if I think the people I'm working with will laugh at it. And if I think I can get them to laugh, then I'm going to do it with the intention that if it can make them laugh, I assume the audience will laugh as well. Not everybody. I mean, today we were doing that Padres song, and who was the guy that hated it? No, Boyle liked it, but there was a listener that hated it, said he was never going to listen again or whatever. He was skipping segments or whatever. Anyway, but if I read a handle like Foxy Dong 69, Mraz loves all bathroom humor, and Pete and Bogish love handle humor. I didn't even know this was like a genre of humor, but our listeners have just kept elevating how crazy their Twitter handles are. And now, if I read a crazy one, you'll hear in the background, Pete and Bogish will dial. Mraz will usually be good for a laugh, but like, I know when I can get Pete laughing, that's really funny. And that gets me going. So the days where I'm really putting my foot on the gas on a certain joke, on a certain punchline, either I think it's really funny and I'm just convinced, but usually it's because I'm playing off somebody in the studio, and Pete's usually the toughest audience. Mraz is the easiest audience. Pete's usually the toughest audience. Yeah, backwards Brian says that's what's in. I don't know about you guys, but I legitimately have been singing That's What's In and texting my friends That's What's In for 48 hours now. And I always say this. I mean, the drops become earworms and they rot your brain and you can't shake them. And that's what's in. This stupid Padres song is totally it. And so today, I watched yesterday's NLCS game.
Philly going down to yellow and brown. That's what's in.
Good day, San Diego.
Padres on the loose.
There's an element of this, and I'm not from the West Coast, obviously. I'm from New York. But there's an element of this that just feels like
he's going to cruise.
That's the most West Coast thing ever. The reputation that
Philly
the West Coast has over here is a bunch of fair weather fans that if they're not that good, don't bother. Not really that angry on sports radio. And, when a team is good, like you try to act cool and wear their stuff and you do dopey stuff like this song. And you never like hesitate because you don't think that you're going to get ripped or beaten up or scorned or something. Whereas here, it's and this is not better or worse, it's a much more intense sensation. If a team is losing, it's days, weeks, months, years of just hammering that team on sports radio, badgering those players, crushing those coaches. And like, you could not put this song together in New York or Philly or Boston and not expect like, oh my God, I'll be clowned forever. So we see this and it's like, oh, these are kind of bros, flat brim hats, Padres gear, really dorky song. Good morning, San Diego. It's like, it's just such central casting. But when I'm thinking about how to talk about the game today for the show this morning, what I usually do is I watch the games at night and then I put together the topic sheet. Mraz sends me the topics that could be used, and then I send him back, well, to the whole staff. Here's what time I want to do what topics. I put in those headlines that you'll see, the puns at the bottom of the screen of the graphics, and kind of set up the questions of how I'd like to answer them, set up the question or the topics of the angle that I want to take on them. And sometimes I'll finish up thinking about things on my way to work. I've got about an hour's drive into the city. So I kind of like formulate exactly what I want to do on the way in. And I'm thinking like, what's the most interesting way to play this Padres and Phillies game? And it's a must win for the Padres, really, because they're down 0-1 already. They got to go back to Philadelphia. They kind of exploded the fifth inning. But really, the way that I'm viewing this is through the stupid "That's What's In" video. Because as they're playing last night, I'm texting my friends when Machado hits the home run. I get a text that says, Machado's going to cruise. That's what's in. I'm getting these from my friends. So I'm like, I think that we have to frame this game in that way. And because Pete and I have worked long enough together, I mentioned Machado. I forget how it came up in the first segment, because the cold open was about the Astros over the Yankees, but Pete knew it and then went to that. And then once it was funny again, once I could tell it was funny again, then I was like, okay, we'll keep playing this guitar hit. Right. And so Pat Boyle was in for Mraz today because of the sinkhole or the flu or whatever Mraz was out for today. Pat loved it because Pat wasn't part of yesterday's show. So Pat was dying. Well, he was also angry, which was good. Like angry Pat Boyle's good as well. So I'm like, let's just keep running this play. This is really funny. And so if you listen to the entire show for 4 hours and you heard us do the "That's What's In" Padres bit 3 times, it probably, after we did it yesterday twice, I could understand it would get aggravating, but you should know you guys are the hardest of the hardcores. The rule of thumb in radio is you have your audience for 20 minutes. You don't ever assume you have them for longer than 20. Some might stick around for some of that, for more than that. Some might stick around for less than that, but you get them for basically 20 minutes. And so you kind of have to hit on the same topics multiple times. I'm not very good at this because it's tedious to do the same things over and over and over again, but I try. And so today, when we do the Padres game 3 different times and we do that bit, just know if you heard it 3 times, I thank you for sticking around for 3 of the bits, but the target is not for you to have to listen to that 3 times. The target is hopefully we catch you once with that bit, and then it's not so awful. It's not. Okay, so Big Lar says, can we get a commitment from you for a week of no Patriots or Brady for an entire week, please? So I will take a public vote on this. My guess is some of you are sick of me talking about the Patriots or Brady, but most of you would prefer if I had a take on the Patriots or Brady. Only because those are 2 significant stories. And I would imagine, I don't know this, I'm not a consumer of me, but that if you're coming to the show, you'd like me to hit on primary topics and get my take on primary topics. And one of the biggest topics is what's happening with Tom Brady. And look, you might go to First Take or Get Up or First Things First or Get Out or Bark Out Loud or Pardon Me This or whatever. There's a million talk TV shows, then all of your sports radio, whether it's you listen to Ryder or Rome or Gelb or JR or Amy or whoever on our network and, other places. I get it. You might hear tons of Brady and you're like, by the time I get to the DA show, I just want like Mraz fell in a sinkhole bit. But if I'm doing my job, like I have to have a take on Brady. And when I do talk about things like the Patriots and Brady, I can tell you, unlike some of those other TV shows that do stories because they believe in the reaction, I do stories that I care about. And this is one of the great things about doing this show is that the bosses are never like, you got to talk about this. You can't talk about that. The ratings go down when you do this. The numbers aren't there. We don't get micromanaged like that. So this Brady thing, I generally find to be massively interesting. The Patriots less so, but you have to remember, Big Lar, where I'm coming from. I grow up on sports with the NFL on Sunday with my dad. We did not have cable growing up. I didn't get cable until I was in 9th grade. So my football is relegated to Sundays at 1, Sundays at 4. That's it. I'm not allowed to stay up for Monday Night Football. I get one quarter if I'm lucky. Mom always made me go to bed at basically 9:20, 9:30. So, and Monday Night Football when I was a kid kicked off at 9 o'clock Eastern time. I don't get a Sunday night game. There is no Thursday night game. Yeah, there's Thanksgiving, but I'm relegated to 2 games. So I have a game at 1, a game at 4 with my dad, the playoffs, and NFL films. And that's it. And that's my football indoctrination. I don't grow up in a college football family. I don't grow up in a college football region. So my football is that. And it's why I talk about NFL history incessantly. I love it. It's football cards, it's NFL films, and it's those 2 games on Sundays. And that's my whole youth and why I love football. And I poured over those NFL films VHS tapes. I mean, I wrote a letter to NFL Films offices to get a catalog that they would send, and then I could check off which, video I wanted my dad to buy me or my mom to buy me for Christmas. I mean, so I poured over these things. So I say this because Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time, and this is the end. It's undoubtedly the end. So documenting the end, which is shaky, which is personal, which is not glorious, is of never-ending fascination to me because there's like 22 years of Tom Brady, and then there's one of this Tom Brady. The Patriots dynasty eroding reminds me of in the late 80s when I had learned about the Steel Curtain and the Steelers of the 70s, and then they had eroded by the time I'm watching football. I basically remember my first games that I watched with my dad in 86. So by the time I'm 7 years old in 86, so by the time the Steelers, I'm getting to know the Steelers, like that's not the Steel Curtain. So I remember the bad Chuck Noll days. I'm very much into the end of the Cowboys' reign because my dad, an enormous Giants fan dating back to the Yankee Stadium days, the Cowboys haunted him forever. So we were kind of watching, I'm watching alongside him, like the haunting of the Cowboys and the end of Tom Landry. And, I'm now kind of an adult as Don Shula wraps up his career, and there's kind of this sad kind of Dan Marino. Can he ever get Marino back to a Super Bowl thing happening? And so this Patriots thing, it's happening again. This is a dynasty in decline. And I am fascinated by these types of things because it's a historical marker. And I undeniably believe that this is it for the Patriots. Now, do I hate the Patriots? Yeah, I used to hate them. Now I don't really hate them because there's nothing to really hate. They're not that good anymore. But I am fascinated by the erosion of this. And I am convinced that they have played their last Super Bowl, won their last big game under Bill Belichick. I'm convinced of this. Could be wrong, convinced. So when I talk about these things, I talk about them from a position of passion. I really do care about documenting and discussing these grand historical NFL markers, which I believe both Brady and the Bucs and the Patriots are. This is why I talk about them. There's so many comments. I'm sorry that I'm not going to get to all of them. Mraz is always wrong. Are you just defying Moist Pork's disdain for your shirt care? The Moist Pork thing is interesting because when he used to comment / critique my fashion, my shirts, my cuffs, whatever, it's coming from a guy that I don't know. And I do consider you all friends to a certain degree because you listen to the show, you care about the show. But if I've never met you, it's hard to take critique. It's why I don't get bent out of shape on Twitter or Instagram or when Facebook was a thing or whatever, when people would criticize me. A lot of public personalities get really wrapped up in that. And I suppose when I was younger, that would be more likely to happen. But, if I don't know you and you're critiquing me, it's really hard for me to care that much. And people kind of think they can get your goat. But so Moist Pork telling me I don't dress well, it's like, well, what do I care? I don't really know you. Then I met Moist Pork. So now the critique becomes personal because he came to the Little Mo game this summer in Camden Yards. And I thought we hit it off. I thought we got along great. But I could tell there's an element of moist pork that likes to be, as my grandma might say, a nudge, which is a little bit of an agitator. He likes to poke, prod, twist a little bit to get a bit of a reaction. He's a nudge. And from that, I really have to say that I think about how moist pork wants me to not roll my sleeves up to my elbows. He wants them to just be cuffed once. And he wants me to have shirt stays. He gave me shirt collar. I think they're called stays, whatever they're called. They go in the little corners here. But as much as I really got along with moist pork, I can't dictate my fashion sense based on moist. I don't feel comfortable getting up, going to work, dressing myself and being like, well, what would moist pork want to see me in? That makes me feel a little uncomfortable that I would have to kind of like defer to moist pork. A man that calls himself moist pork, by the way. So that's where I stand. It's a bit of a complicated situation. Let me give you the example of this. Moist wants me to just cuff my shirt sleeves like this. And this is a shirt that has a different print, as you see on the sleeve. But if I do this, look at how, and maybe I just have an ill-fitting shirt. You know, you talk like this, you talk with your hands, and look how I think this looks sloppier. Now you want to say you could tighten this up. Maybe you could do that. And maybe I do need the collar stays. But, you know, if I do this, I don't feel good. And I think feeling good is important when you're on the radio or doing something on TV so that you are not distracted by your fashion or how you look. You're just talking. So that's why I do this with the rest of my sleeves, tighten them up. It's less flimsiness. It's less. And, you know, if moist pork doesn't approve, you know, what can I do? Gloria Splat says, I just want you to hit one more button in the front. Okay. Well, so let's do this. This is actually what this should be, the Q&A. I'm going to button this and you tell me if it looks better. I'm open for conversation here, but I think it looks stuffy. I think it looks like it's one button too high. But let's go back to the first episode of Seinfeld where they openly discuss that top button's in no man's land. It is. Men's shirts have still not evolved enough. This to me is too high, but this, I agree, is probably too low. But this, I just think looks stuffy. Wrong, right? I mean, I can stay with this. And this one, I don't know. It just feels a little stuffy to me. But Rock Show 719 says, you look like someone that I would feel comfortable loaning money to now. Okay. Now, is part of that maybe slightly racist because my last name is Italian? Just because I got a little bit more chest hair, or as Bart Scott used to say, hamburger meat coming out? I mean, if I'm blonde hair, blue eyes, you still feel uncomfortable loaning me money if I have this top button down? If I look like Chris Hemsworth? This is like the Marshall Falk debate we had today. I ask you. I ask you that. Still Junior 2018. DA, have you watched Andor? Tremendous. I've got to confess. My brother and I watched Star Wars, Return of the Jedi, and Empire Strikes Back approximately 200 times during our youth. I mean, probably more than that. And the way that we got them, we didn't go to the theaters to see them because I take that back. I didn't see Star Wars in 77, didn't see Empire in 81 or 80. I did see Return of the Jedi in 83. I did go with my dad, my uncle, and my cousin to go see it, but I would have been 4 years old. So it was early. So we watched them all. The way that we got them was my uncle used to have Laserdisc, big time. And he bought the Star Wars Laserdiscs and then converted them to VHS for us. So we had converted VHS Star Wars. So, I mean, we ran those VHSs out. We just ran them out. I love those movies. Still do. Didn't like the reboot when Lucas tried to tinker with stuff and Han steps over Jabba's tail. I never thought that looked stupid. The whole George Lucas. I went to go see them back in the theater when they were re-released in 97. But I liked the old ones, the originals, which apparently now you can't find anymore because Lucas has scrubbed them. Then the prequels I hated with a passion, a burning fire. All of them. People try to convince me on the third one. I still am not having it. Then we got to the new ones, and I liked, I guess it's Force Awakens. I liked the reboot of the first one. I really liked the next one. Forget what that was called. I'm sorry. This is bad. Then I hated The Last Skywalker, the one where Luke is on the island. Hated it. That was the one done by the other guy. This is bad. Yeah, Rogue. I liked Rogue. I think The Last Jedi was the one that I hated. And The Last Jedi really started turning me off. And I'm like, they lost the soul of this thing. I've heard the third reboot thing, whatever we're calling them now, was much better. I still haven't seen it. Haven't seen Han Solo. And then the TV shows, you guys know this is perhaps a character flaw. I just don't do TV shows. It's just a lot of content I have to absorb to like get into the flow of things. And I don't have the patience for that content. Like you have to consider this. Every night I might get 2 hours of TV time. Maybe 3. They have to be dedicated to games. And I like watching games, but they have to be. Because if I spend more than 3 hours watching TV during the day, during the night, what have you, like I'm not being that productive. And so those 3 hours I spend watching games. On the weekends, I spend a lot of time watching college football and the NFL. You know, it just doesn't leave a lot of time. Now you say, well, during the summer, yeah, I try to watch as much NBA playoffs as possible right through the finals. Finals will wrap up in late June. It gives me 2 months. Like, how much TV do I need to squeeze in the summer when I want to be outside until it's 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, on the deck, grilling, using the smoker, you know, I like to be outside. So I just don't have the patience. So I've heard all these things are good. The Mandalorian I've heard is good. Andor I'm sure is good. All this stuff. And I am a Star Wars guy at heart, but long way of saying I don't have the patience. And I will say this. I'm not proud of the fact that I haven't seen a lot of TV because what I have found is when I have been forced into watching something, I've really enjoyed it. When I worked in Kansas City, I worked there in 03, 04, 05, 06, 07. So those 4 to 5 years. And at the time, Jeff Passan, who's now ESPN baseball reporter, he worked at the Kansas City Star. And I had known him since college. I was a senior and he was a junior. So I was a year above him throughout school. He was in newspaper. I was in broadcasting. But when I was in KC, he's like, are you watching The Wire? Because it was, happening at the time. I said, no. He goes, why aren't you? And he shamed me. You have to watch this. This is brilliant. It's awesome. And I was like, TV. Yeah. He's like, you have to. He even gave me the box set of this. He had bought the DVDs and gave them to me. And I was really very lethargic on getting around to it, apathetic. As the lore of it grew, its cultural significance, I finally relented and said, I do have to watch this. And when I sat down and watched the first season, I was like, holy bleep, this is awesome. It was one of those series where I had to keep watching the next episode and I couldn't wait to watch the next episode. Season 2 with the containers, I wasn't really that into the docs. But season 3, season 4, I am literally like, I can't wait to get to the next episode because this is so good. And the same thing happened with Breaking Bad. I was guilted into watching Breaking Bad from Mraz and Bogish, and I started with my wife. She had seen it the first time through. We were not together then, and I was like, do you want to rewatch it with me? And she's like, I've already seen it, but maybe. So I started watching it, and like within 3 episodes, I said, this is awesome. This is just really smart, well made, incredibly well written, incredibly well acted. This is great. So I'm sure there are TV shows out there that are like that. And I'll eventually get around to them. But the joke is, like, I'll get around to them 10 years after they're off the air. So that's the bit. Gloria Splat reminds me I can curse here. You're among shitty friends. Great. Thanks. Rock Show asked, did I ever finish Breaking Bad? Yeah, I finished it. I thought it was amazing. I would say out of my favorite TV shows of all time, I love Seinfeld. It's hard to put Seinfeld in any type of artistic category, but like The Wire to me is the greatest TV series I've ever watched. Breaking Bad is second. The Sopranos is third. And again, I'm not putting Seinfeld in there only because it's not that type of ilk, but it's, to me, the most rewatchable show because I can pop in on any episode anytime and watch it. And The Office is like that as well until we get to the Robert California years. And then I have to check out, the Will Ferrell years or year, Robert California. The end of The Office gets sad. It's kind of like Brady this year. It's like it had such a peak. Also loved Parks and Rec. But those are easy to digest. Those are a half hour every week. You rip through those. Rob of the 321 asks, can we please bring back This Date Mothership history? I've thought about that. There was an element of that was labor intensive because before the show every single day, the guys had to go through the archives of, now we've been on the air 10 years here, of going back through that date. At that time it was 8 years of every day and see what happened that day. And the reason that worked was because it was pandemic and we didn't have any games to watch and we didn't have any like hard research to be doing. We were kind of winging it for 4 hours every day on non-news. It's a little harder today because I don't know if it fits in the middle of like heavy news cycle stuff. Today, I don't think it works specifically today because, there's too much sports to talk about. If I took 7 minutes to talk about something that happened 5 years ago on the show and then broke it down for 5 minutes, to me, it's kind of a waste of a segment. Not to say it wouldn't be interesting, especially for longtime listeners, but if I bring it back, it would be during the summer, I think, which is why I brought back Mothership at the Movies this summer. I thought it just ended up being a really smart, funny segment. And Mraz does Mothership at the Movies as well as it can be done. And I have told him this. That bit works because I got buy-in from the guys. And Mraz does it as well as you can do it. Because the bit is, I'm sure you know because you've listened to the show and you're watching on Twitch, the bit has to be that the sports movie you watch is based wholly in reality. That what you watch is not a sports movie, it's a sports documentary. And you have to click your brain into that. And I thought about that as the hook when we did it, but I didn't know the execution. Because I've done this with my friends before, a sounding board of like, you take something silly in a sports movie and act as though it really happened. But, now you flesh that out to be a weekly segment, and it's got to be good or else it falls really flat. And I'll say this frankly, I think most sports talk hosts are not funny. I've said this on the air before. I worry that I'm not funny because I've heard so much unfunny sports talk. So when you do this bit, when you're doing this bit in my mind, you're like, this has to be funny and everybody has to get it or else it's going to die quickly. Because I don't want to break down a movie like we're Siskel and Ebert. One of them's dead. Is both of them dead now? Both of them. Thank you, Cap. R.I.P. to both. So the buy-in has to be, we're watching this movie, but don't watch it like a movie. Watch it like a doc. Watch it like a game. And there's something about Mraz's idiot savant brain. He got it immediately. And I think it's because he's probably oftentimes watched fiction as nonfiction. But he got it immediately. And Mraz, in many ways, does Mothership of the Movies better than I do it. Because Mraz watches fiction and gets emotional about the fiction as though it was nonfiction. Again, it's probably where his realities collide. But there's been a few times, if you go back and you listen to Mothership of the movies, Mraz leads me because he'll have a take and it'll be so emotional about something that didn't happen in real life and get so worked up that I can then dive into that pool and swim as well. And it's one of his great strengths. And I'm like, this bit works because Mraz is going to get worked up about Billy's mom being proposed to in game 163. This will work because that will send him off the handle because Billy's managing and suddenly Billy's mom is being proposed to by the star of the team. And now an 11-year-old kid has to deal with managing game 163 to get the Twins into the playoffs. And my single mom now has a new boyfriend, And because Mraz can do that and get really agitated and emotional, that's why that bit works. It doesn't work when you're like, oh, that acting isn't good or the story didn't make sense. It only works if you take all of that for granted that it's not acting and the story does work because this is what really happened. That's my TED Talk on Mothership and the movies. Okay, we've done 40 minutes here. This was a lot of fun. I got to sign off because I got other stuff to do. I have to go to Floor and Decor to pick up 20 cases of vinyl flooring. We're redoing the basement. We're redoing so new home studio coming by the holidays. Cap's going to love it. It's going to be amazing. But my non-studio part of the basement's got to have vinyl flooring. I got to go pick it up. So I'm on the clock. The Bourbon Bill will be very unhappy if I don't get this today. Contractors at the house already working on stuff, so I got to go get it. So anyway, thank you everybody for hanging out with us. This was a lot of fun. Seemed to work relatively well. If I didn't get to your question, I'm sorry, but we'll have more opportunities to jive, to hang out. And if you see Moist Pork, tell them I'm sorry, but I just can't take it that seriously. Anyway, we're signing off. We'll see you tomorrow on the DA show. See you, everybody.